So unsurprisingly, there is a ton of excitement surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2 right now. Pre-orders are now live, the system launch is just around the corner, and they've already showed off a ton of great games that are coming at launch, in the launch window, or later on this year in 2025. But there is one specific announcement that Nintendo made that definitely caught a lot of people off guard, myself included, and of course I'm talking about the game keycards. Because this has been hotly debated, to say the least, whether it's Nintendo maybe giving up on physical media altogether, or maybe this is just sort of a terrible improvement of sorts. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Specifically, I wanted to go over what game keycards are, in case you're not familiar, then also why they might be beneficial in some scenarios, and then finally some scenarios where they probably aren't, and then wrap this whole thing up by talking about my personal thoughts on what this might mean. But first, let's talk about what game keycards actually are. Now, Nintendo's game keycards have the same color and the same form factor as what you get from a regular Nintendo Switch 2 cartridge, however it does not have any game data on it, rather it just has a small amount of data on it that provides a key that allows you to download the game digitally. And to play that game, you have to make sure that the keycard stays in the system. And even if you don't have a Nintendo Switch Online account at all, you can still download a game and play it the same way as you would with any other physical game that you would pop in your system. Of course, you just have to wait for the download to finish. And the idea of having this physical card that you plug into your Switch to access your digital download is technically an improvement in so much as it's better than a digital code you would just buy in a box that is then just completely empty and ultimately pretty wasteful. And also, unlike a pure digital game, if your Nintendo account got nuked for some reason, you would still have access to your game because again, it does not require a Nintendo Switch Online account to download the data and start playing it. Not to mention it still feels more physical, I guess, than just having a random receipt code that you're going to put in once, download your game, and then never think about again. But if you're thinking to yourself, that still sounds like digital just with extra steps, that's because it absolutely is digital with extra steps. And even though it may technically be better than just a code in a box, I'm not sure that's enough of an improvement that it really warrants the widespread adoption of a technology like this. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the bad parts of this, and I think one of the first things that comes to mind for me is the fact that physical collectors definitely want to have the entire game, all DLC, ideally the best version of a game, all on cart without having to download any additional data. Sometimes that's going to be completely impractical if you've got a game that's 150 gigabytes or something like that, but where you can, it usually makes sense if you're somebody who values game preservation, or just physical collecting in general, to have everything on cart without having to mess with any downloads at all. And when it comes to that preservation piece, the problem with game keycards is we're not sure if the servers that allow you to download that game are still going to exist in 20 or 30 years. And while I do think there are scenarios under which indie developers or publishers could use this technology in an ethical way, I'm also a little bit concerned that big publishers will use it in a decidedly scummy way, probably cutting costs but without providing any real benefit to consumers. And in a way I think you could argue we're already seeing this happen, because there are more than a few games that technically should fit completely on a cart, but for whatever reason are being delivered as a game keycard instead for their physical presence. So as far as who this actually helps, I think really who stands to benefit the most probably are indie developers, because for them I think it'll be a nice way to lower production costs and make a physical run more feasible. And in a way it will also help players who also decide to go for a game keycard over a digital version, in so much as it'll be very easy for them to lend those out to a friend, trade it in once they're tired of it, or just sell it off entirely and make sure whoever gets that game keycard next can actually play the game. That is one distinct advantage that I think these hold over the pure digital route, is that they don't get locked to your account and you can freely trade or resell them. But for serious collectors and preservationists who want the entire game on that cartridge and they want to know they can fire it up regardless of whether or not they have an internet connection, this is probably going to hold exactly zero appeal. Now, as far as where I personally land on game keycards, I can't say I'm wholly opposed to them because I did pre-order at least one of them with Bravely Default, but I am very much a physical collector, and by and large I prefer to have the entire game on disc or on cart wherever I'm able. But I have to admit that if it's approached ethically, it could be a helpful tool for smaller outfits. But if it gets exploited wholesale by larger publishers, I think that could set kind of a dangerous precedent. And I think in terms of how acceptable I'll likely find game key cards long term, really depends on how common they become. Will they be a niche tool, or will they really set the industry standard? And if it's the latter, that's a lot more concerning to me. Generally, I try to keep an open mind and take a more nuanced view on things like this, especially when it comes to technological advancement within the world of video games. However, I just can't shake the feeling that maybe this is some horrific Trojan horse at scale that's meant to warm gamers up the world over to be more okay with digital downloads. After all, how long do you think it'll take the average player to keep swapping in-game keycards every time they want to play what is ostensibly a digital game before it starts to become kind of tiresome and they think to themselves, hey, why don't I just buy the digital version because that would be a whole lot easier? I mean, maybe I'm just being paranoid here, and honestly, I hope I am being paranoid here, but does it really sound that far-fetched? I mean, if you were Nintendo and you could find a way to shore up your profits by priming millions of players the world over to adopt more digital games, even if it's only by a couple of percent at scale, imagine how much money you would make from a move like that, and doesn't this seem like a great way to accomplish exactly that? Food for thought. So to sum this whole thing up, yes, I do think game key cards are better than a code in a box, however, I'm not so sold that the advantages that they provide necessarily outweigh the dangerous precedent that it might end up setting long term for console gaming. But this is just one guy's opinion. Maybe I am just being a crazy conspiracy theorist on this whole thing, but what do you think about it? Do you think game key cards have any redeeming qualities whatsoever, or do you think that it's something that just should not exist at all and is really just a terrible mix of both worlds that is less convenient than a digital code and somehow much worse than physically collecting? If so, I would love to hear your feedback on this below, because I'm sure you have some things that I have not even considered. So now, as far as what's coming up on the channel, I'll be doing some more Switch 2 content as we get closer to launch. One of the videos that I'm working on right now is actually the Switch 1 games I'm excited to play on the Switch 2. Some will be checking out for the first time, other I'll just be revisiting there. But that's it for this one. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here on the channel. I really, really appreciate it. Have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.